What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Confidently Flawed. Your hosts, Brooke and Danny, joined again with Brad from Resolute Physical Therapy. We had him on last week, and we had just such wonderful conversations on physical therapy and addressing individual needs and speaking up, and just so many wonderful conversations. And this week, we wanted to continue, and we're so happy to have Brad back to continue the conversation on physical therapy. And this week, we kind of really want to spend the time talking about fitness and when to kind of know that you're ready to get back into the world of fitness and your normal routine, but also when it's important to know when to work with a physical therapist and how to work with that physical therapist, and really in general just how to know your body and to really work through that progression. So Brad, welcome back to Confidently Flawed.
Glad to be back.
Awesome. So let's continue on. So last week we kind of wrapped up the conversation just talking about, the progression that we see with physical therapy, and when to know when to work with a physical therapist, when to know we're ready to kind of get more into fitness, but also how to get back into that fitness world. So I'd love to just open up that conversation and continue where we left off last week.
Yeah. So once you're into physical therapy, generally you're gonna learn a little bit more about your injury, why you're there, what's happening, what type of injury that it is, because that really dictates a lot of things in terms of loading principles, in terms of types of exercises. Simplest way to break it down, or the simplest thing that a physical therapist should generally do is look at your range of motion. How do you move? Do you have enough motion through your muscle and through your joint that allows you to perform whatever task you're coming in to do, whether or not it be a squat, a snatch, to pick up your baby, to do just laundry, whatever it is you need to do. I need to make sure that that joint, those muscles can move through that full range of motion, and allow you to do that. I always talk to people, they're like, man, I can't bend over, touch my toes. And I go, do you need to do that? Right? Like, you're only this far away from it. Are you a dancer? Like, what do we need that much hamstring range of motion for? Like, if you give me a good reason, like, yeah, let's go ahead, let's get it. But if you're just going to sit there and be like, well, only when I bend forward and try and touch my toes, I was like, okay, bend your knee, right? Like, we have another joint there, utilize that. Oh, cool. Now I can reach my feet, I can tie my shoes. Cool, got it. Like, that's generally all I need it for. Boom, there we go. Now there's very, very bad situations where it's like somebody flexes forward and their hands don't go past their knees, and it's like, well, okay, hold on, right? But generally, you're going to see that present itself, and they can't do a task during the day, right? They have a weird compensation. Okay, so we try to find those range of motion deficits. We try to understand those. You got to open those up first, right? Because now we're going to start to strengthen. People strengthen. You see a lot of people doing that external rotation. If you've ever walked into a physical therapy clinic, shoulder, oh, you doing I do those too, right? And they're just cranking those out like it's nobody's business, sticking to the same weight sometimes and just doing 30 in a row. And they look at their technician sometimes and they go, okay, what's next? We got to progress that, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is one aspect or one range the shoulder will sit in. But do I work external rotation through more flexion, abduction? Do I work external rotation in another position? Well, yet again, those all depend on, one, where are you weak, right? Strong is all get out here, but as soon as you take me up here, falls down. I can't tolerate any force at that point, right? So I can work this day. That's not going to correlate to this, or very minimally that it will. On top of that, do you do this? Do you want to go overhead? Do you want to put 200 pounds over your head or whatever it might be? Lift your kid up over your head? Well, okay, we better work something up overhead and gain strength through that entire range of motion, right? So now I've gained all the range. I've developed strength through that range. Well, now you got to understand the mechanics, right? Because generally, if you especially have a chronic issue, you're going to start to notice when things get hard, when you get tired, when you're dealt a variable that makes you kind of space out and all you're focused on is performing the task, you're going to revert right back to what you were previously doing, especially if this has been going on for years.
Yeah.
And then you're going to develop the same patterns. You're going to develop the same issues. You're going to fall right back into the same track. So then we take the time to work on mobility, which is utilizing that range of motion and that strength together to create a situation where, one, you feel the movement, right? You'll learn about me. I hate mirrors. I don't like people looking at themselves because most of the time you can't look at yourself. You have to feel where you are when you pick up that case of waters or anything like that. It can be utilized, but should eventually transition into that internal cueing, right? But you have to basically take that movement, learn to move through a position, know where you are in that position. Am I not correct? Am I correct? What should I be feeling? And then when you understand those things, that's when we have a lot of conversations about, okay, you're good, go. I don't need you here anymore. Now, does that mean that you stop all activity in between that, that first day, day one physical therapy to, whatever day, graduation date at that point? Stereotypically, no. I don't like to see people stop because there are so many other muscles on that body that have no issues whatsoever that we can work around whatever is painful, right? You come in, you have knee issues. Why aren't we working your shoulders? Why don't we work your core? Why don't we work your biceps, your triceps, your wrist extensors, flexors? The list is endless. Let's go ahead and keep working on all those things, right? And also, if you start getting through that process, we talked about that optimal therapeutic level, right? We're getting to that. We can implement some of those things into your exercise at a lower therapeutic level that you're not gonna get close to that line. So we'll be safe as we're doing those things. But one, it gives you that mental reprieve of I'm working out still. I'm still progressing. I'm still working on moving forward and maintaining what I've worked so hard to get. So we can do that. And man, you want to talk about a mental load off your shoulders. Biggest thing is when I work with athletes who, and I call an athlete, Joe Schmo that's walking off the street
Anybody
that loves,
right?
yeah, you want to be healthy, you want to be an active individual, you're an athlete to me, right? If you care about your health, you care about moving, you're an athlete to me, right? Versus somebody that just sits on the couch all day and does nothing. That's a non-athletic person for me. But that person, when they walk in, to tell them that they need to step away, or that doctor that goes, you can't do that anymore. Oh my God, dagger to the chest, man. You might as well just, zip them in a body bag and they're like, I'm done. I'm done. I'm not going to work out anymore. And they just stop. And it's like, no, why are we doing that? Why, let's continue. For your mental sanity alone, let's keep you moving so that you can be happy as you're going from thing to thing to thing. Now, I will say, it generally is hard for people because they don't know how do I implement these things? If you're just going to a gym and you're like, hey, I'm here. Well, Brad's not here. What do I do now? Right. Yeah. And it's really hard as a physical therapist to, like, if I see you 1 to 2 days a week, what are you doing on those other 5? I'm not going to write you an exercise program for all 5 days. You do that for 30 people. I would go a little crazy, right? Yeah. So there's gotta be a nice little, aspect of we converse about it, things like that. But the best thing is find yourself a good coach that knows what he's talking about, that has a relationship with your physical therapist and can text and be like, hey, real quick, lay out, like, what are we dealing with? And knows when I say, hey, it's the infraspinatus, it's not firing correctly, it's causing the scapula to move improperly. And he's gonna be like, yep, got it, cool, right? Like, I don't have to write an entire workout program for him. He just knows, okay, I understand what is generally happening. I will make sure that we're at least staying below or below that therapeutic level, below that tolerance level, and allow this person to keep doing what we're trying to do, right? Plus, you have goals that you're generally working with that person. I don't want to impede those. So you can tell me, hey, this is what this person's been trying to do. How are we going to work together? How are we going to keep them moving forward? Because biggest thing is you make life a habit, right? We've talked about that before. Yeah. If you fall off that habit, oh God, it's the hardest thing is to get it back, right? And you don't want to have to go through that entire process. So keep those habits, keep moving forward is key, right?
Yeah, I think it makes perfect sense. Like doing the right things in the right order, right? Like getting that range of motion back, getting the strength back, and then kind of building it into the structure of what you do on an everyday life. And then to continue it, like have the network around you or the support and community around you of a therapist that can talk to your fitness coach, that can understand each other and what they're doing, and that will allow you that long-term success to where you don't have any congruency there, to where you go from your therapist and you jump right into the fitness. And this is probably why therapists don't tell people not to work out, even though that's not what's best for them. You know what I mean? But it's because they can't communicate well with their fitness coach or whatever it is, where, one thing I've loved about what we're doing is we're going to infuse what you do with our clients, or vice versa, right? Like with your clients that want to get into fitness, that you can send them to a place that they can still get the benefits of what you're doing without hurting it. and still allow them to work on their fitness. So it's, you're getting the best of both worlds, which is what it should be,
Oh,
right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's trust. It's all
Yeah.
trust at that point, right? You don't want to walk into an area and then, you're always going to be sussing out the situation, all that. But if you have somebody that you generally already trust, that I can say, hey, right, like this is a situation, go see Danny, right? Like he's the guy. I don't need to explain a whole lot. You've worked with me for a while. You trust. I've moved you this far along. This is the guy that's gonna keep plugging along, gonna keep it moving in that general direction. On top of implementing other aspects. I mean, we talked about things that I don't even necessarily know super well. I'm a master in terms of understanding movement mechanics, muscle, the skeleton, things like that. But when it comes to nutrition, I'm a hobbyist,
Yeah.
right? To all intents and purposes, you put way more time and effort into that, and that's huge in the healing process, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Keep
if you,
inflammation down and all that. Yeah.
yep, building blocks, proteins, like all of the things that go into that healing process, and that's super important. You hit both aspects of that, so it's super beneficial for me to make sure that they're still coming to see you, and that we're keeping this cohesive flow between the two of us that is going to progress that because what do people want? I want to be better faster, right?
Yeah.
Like snap your fingers, I want to be good, like I want to feel like I was back when I was 20 years old or something along those lines, and just be solid, be ready to move, and implementing all of these things together. People got to realize like it's the goal. That's what you're trying to do, right?
Yeah. And sustain it. You know what I mean?
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's the biggest thing. Like if I have a therapist that I can say, you know what, you got some things going on. I think you need to like get a little bit more attention with this. Like let's have you meet with Brad and all that. So then I know our clients they're getting the foundation built,
Mhm.
right? And then as you get them back in here, it's, well, I know what they're doing is going to keep the foundation strong and continue it, right?
Yeah.
But if you don't have that congruency, and that's why I think a lot of people are nervous to get back into fitness
Mhm.
after they've had injuries or what have you, is because they don't have that congruency of, working the two ends of the spectrum of therapeutic, getting back into everyday life. And I think that's just so critical for, kind of overall long-term success in your health and your fitness and your body.
100%. Yeah. One of the hardest things that, most physical therapists probably don't talk about or you hear about is how do I make this person confident in the fact that they're not just going to go right back to doing what they're doing and instantly break back down, right? And it's hard sometimes because when you walk out of my office, I'm not going to go with you, right?
Not within the other 23 hours of the day.
100%. So, it's super difficult on my end, especially, let's say they don't have it. They have a guy. I got a guy. I love this guy, right? Which, once somebody's decided upon somebody,
Yeah.
one, I don't generally like to badmouth anybody,
Yeah.
right? I try to give people knowledge and things along those lines. But I'll hear stories from patients sometimes. They're like, "Oh yeah, he was having me do, this," and it's like, huh? Like, why? No, please
Yeah.
don't do that,
Yeah.
right? Like that's not the situation we want,
Right.
right? Especially if you're talking about an overuse injury,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you're just beating the crap out of it where they're like more and more and more. It's no, back off. Let's like calm it down a little bit. We can work it, but let's, over that threshold for sure. And having that trust and when people go through somebody that they think knows, right? They had that person where I, maybe shifted them away, or hopefully maybe I was able to contact them and be like, listen, right, this is the situation. What's your knowledge on this? Whatever it might be, that person's going to be a little timid, dipping that toe back into the water. And you want them to trust the person that you're sending them to, because that's going to, if you don't trust, if you go in half-hearted, that's also another way you can get injured, right? You're always trying to protect. You're not going to move correctly because you don't necessarily have that person there saying, yes, no, that's correct. Oh, that's too much weight, right? You especially through a therapeutic process that took 2 months, maybe at times. At the end of it, if you always had this, you're used to me being there telling you, and then you don't. Well, it's like, am I doing it right? I didn't feel bad, but like, I don't actually know. And then they're just waiting for that pain. And then they kind of mitigate what they do, or they shift, and that creates a compensate. Yeah, you never want to see that. You gotta find somebody you can trust.
Yeah.
Talk to your physical therapist. They generally know the industry. They know the people around, right? If I get a bunch of people coming from a specific gym that are hurt on a regular basis, I'm going to tell you that information.
Yeah.
Same thing with the doctor, right?
Yeah.
Like you come in and it's like, oh, I'm getting my knee replaced, or I have an ACL tear. Like, this is my doc. your PT is probably gonna know because he's rehabbed quite a few of certain injuries from
Yeah.
certain professionals and be like, I don't know if you want to, maybe you should double check, right?
Yeah.
Maybe get a second opinion, make sure that we're doing our due diligence here.
Yeah.
Utilize that resource, man.
Yeah, yeah, it's the community around you, you know what I mean? Yeah, I think this is all really good, you know, I think having an understanding and what I like with what you're saying too is the education piece, like getting them to internally know how to cue the right things and why they're doing certain things for what reason. That's going to help them in the real world, if you will, and I'm using quotes, right? Like, because what you're doing is in the real world, you
Mhm.
know what I mean? But
Yeah.
it's, you know, to like get back into everyday activities, like that's what you need. You need to understand why you're doing it, what you're doing it for, and then how to feel it, what you should be doing. Like that's what's going to give them the confidence so they aren't as timid. You know what I mean? And I do think that's, you know, maybe an issue that people run into with, you know, whether just their therapist or what have you, just didn't maybe educate them the way that it could be, you know, and I think that's where you know, your more hands-on approach is pretty valuable.
Try to be.
I totally agree. I think that there's so much to take out of this, and there's so much to take away in the sense of you're equipping people for, like Danny said, the air quotes, real life, because it is real life, but also, unfortunately, we're humans, especially when we are active humans, we get hurt, we get injured. And the harder we push, unfortunately, sometimes that means the harder, the more chance we can be to getting hurt. And I think it's so important to know our bodies, to trust our bodies, but to also utilize the knowledge that so many people have, the knowledge that you have, Brad, the knowledge that you have, Danny, like putting that all together and utilizing that, I think is so important for us to live the most optimal life and to be able to continue to keep going and to not sit in, oh, I'm injured. Oh, that's it. I'm done. I'm throwing in the towel. No more fitness. Like it's how I'm going to live because, our bodies are so miraculous. Our bodies can do so much with the right tools and the right people. You could come out of that injury better than ever. So Brad, thank you so much for being a guest on Confidently Flawed. Before we wrap up, I'd love for you to share how listeners can get in touch with you, how listeners can start to work with you to have that free consultation. So if they want to work with you, they can.
Yeah, so my business is called Resolute Physical Therapy and Performance, technically. You can visit resolutephysio.com. I'm sure I'll post something related to this so that you can kind of click the link, go to my Instagram page. A lot of people contact me through that or even Google. I'm in the Troy area, but also in the Romeo area. I work both, have two different clinics, and it's just me, right? You're gonna come in, you're only gonna work with me, right? I don't like to shift people off to somebody that maybe technicians I've had great ones. They're not horrible people by any means, but they're not through that process. They're usually high school graduates or undergrad graduates. They haven't learned what I've learned yet. You try to teach them, but you're going to come in, you're going to work with me. We're going to spend the entire hour focusing on just you, what your goals are, and how we're going to achieve those goals. But yeah, like I said, just reach out via resolutephysio.com, go to my Instagram profile, anything along those lines.
Awesome. I will include all of those in the show notes for you guys to easily click and easily access. But Brad, thanks again for being a guest on Confidently Flawed. Your knowledge has been wonderful, and it's really been a pleasure having you on.
Thanks for having me. It's been awesome.
Not a problem. So listeners, thanks again for tuning in. As always, if you got value from this episode or think someone could get value from this, please share. Please give us a rating and review if you haven't yet. And we'll be back next week with another episode of Confidently Flawed.